Welcome to the Craft Store. I'm John Cole Morgan from the Beginner's Quilt Emporium, and my greatest passion in life has got to be quilting. I've been quilting for about 7 years. I run a shop called the Beginner's Quilt Emporium based in Tring in Hertfordshire. And my question that I get asked the most by all beginners is, what's the easiest quilt for me to start with? And this is the easiest one that you can ever start with. And the great thing is you can use whatever fabrics you like, whatever colors you like. If you've got a range of fabric that you like, anything you like will make this work. All you're going to do is you're going to cut these into squares. Now the two quilts on my left and right hand side, both of which are cut as 3-inch squares. So when you piece them together, they come out at 2.5 inches. And the squares on the table, I've got a 4.5-inch squares, so they're half the size of what they were. Now whenever I do a quilt, I always lay them out first. I lay the fabrics out first to see what's going to work, whether I'm happy with the layout. And all I've done here is I've just moved everything along one block. You'll see I've got my bundles here because I'm a little bit of a lazy quilter. I like to make sure that my life is as easy as possible when it comes to this. And all I'm doing is I'm layering them out and I'm staggering it one over. So you'll see that you'll end up with these wonderful diagonal lines as you sew the quilt together, which I think is great because you've got a secondary pattern. But equally, if you don't want to do that and you are a beginner and you're one of those people who would struggle if you don't end up meeting these little points over here, so when they all join together, there's a really simple tip. All you do is you take this in your second row, you just move it down. And it doesn't matter if it's half, it doesn't matter if it's more than half, it doesn't matter if it's a third, because all you'll do is when you get to the end, you'll just chop the end bit off there and you'll add a little bit over there. So it's a really simple way of doing it. So if you want to practice your stitching, that you want things to line up, you can see that over here, if these points match up, great. If they don't, that's okay too. This is meant to be fun. So let me show you once you've laid these out. I'm just going to do these 2 rows because the technique is exactly the same whether you're doing 2 rows or 50. It's all exactly the same. First things first, you're going to need a sewing machine. I always use a stitch length of about 2.4 and I try and make sure that I'm adhering to my 1/4-inch seam. Many people know what a 1/4-inch seam is, and what I'll do is I'll stitch this together for you and I'll show you what a 1/4-inch seam is meant to look like. Of course, now that I'm doing the demonstration for you, it probably won't be a 1/4-inch seam, but we're all friends here and we're going to forgive me if I don't get it quite right. So what you're looking for is once you stitch this line, the 1/4-inch seam means that the gap between your thread and the end of the fabric is going to be 1/4 inch, or just under 1/4 inch. So the gap between the end of your fabric there and your stitch line is going to be 1/4 inch. And if I line that up, that's pretty good. So all you're going to do now is you're just going to keep adding your little squares in a row along there to keeping with the 1/4-inch seam all the way along. Right, so as if by TV magic, that has now been put together really easily, and you can see I'm now going down in my diagonals. If you are a bit of a nervous quilter and you've just started and you're not sure whether you want to try and tackle getting these points on, as I said, all you do is you shift this down half a block. And it doesn't have to be exactly half a block. All you're looking for is that you're going to be off-centered as you go along. Now, if you are going to do that, all you would do is you would just attach an extra square into the top corner over here. Now, I'm a little bit fussy. I want to try and keep these in order, so I'm just going to attach an extra square over here. And it's exactly the same size square as you had before, and you're going to trim these down afterwards. And that means you are now ready to go in order to sew these together. And we're going to put them off center, and you can see I'm going to have a little bit left over here. I'm going to have a little bit left over here. So once I've pressed these and we've sewn them together, we just trim these edges off over there. So the thing now is you've just got to be careful on how you press these. Pressing is really important because you've got to, I never use steam. I think steam is a great thing for certain things, but for quilting, I don't think it's your friend, especially at the beginner stage. So the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to gently run your iron against that first seam. And I'm going to give this a gentle tug over here. I'm not yanking it, I'm not distorting it, I'm just giving it a gentle tug, because all that happens then is it just lines your fabric up perfectly. And you can see all I'm doing is just gently moving the iron along. You do not want to be pressing these really, really hard where your straight lines where you've just stitched suddenly become curves. You definitely do not want that. And there we go. That is your first seam, your first line pressed. You can see the difference there. And then you're going to do exactly the same on the next one. But these ones we've pressed this way, so you can see your seams over here are going in that direction. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to press my seams in this direction on these. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to grab this end and pull this over here, and I'm going to do exactly the same direction of my pressing. It's just that because I've flipped the fabric the other way around, it's going to be going in a different way. And there we go. Not pulling, not pressing. I'm just gently letting the iron do the work for me. And I'm not distorting my seams. And that's all perfectly lined up for you there. So now we're ready to sew these together. If you did want to put these together lined up now, what you'll find is if you flip these over, when you look at the seams here, they will be going in the opposite direction. So they will nest in really nicely. Helps if you turn it the right way around. They'll be nesting in really nicely. You can see I've got these angles down, and when I fold that on top of each other, you'll see they'll nest in really beautifully. Those little seams will just touch each other perfectly there. That's what you're looking for, is that these seams touch and there's no gaps between it. That's if you're going to line everything up. If you're not going to line everything up, that's absolutely fine. All that'll happen is that all your seams will be going in the same way. And there we go. We're going to lean it. I'm going to off-center these. It'll just be easier, and I'll show you now how to do that. And now all we're going to do is sew down this line. And the great thing with this is any size square will work as long as all of your squares are the same size. You just keep going and keep stitching. You can make it as wide as you like. You can make it as small as you like. A dear friend of mine, she made a king-sized quilt, 120 inches square, and she did that with 1-inch squares. So she did a 120-inch quilt with half-inch squares finished. That's called a postage stamp quilt. And I do think that anybody who's got the patience to do that is definitely a better quilter than I am. I'll stick with my 4.5-inch squares because they go together really quickly. And that is your first 2 rows stitched together. And you can see that that works so beautifully being offset like that. And it's a really nice way as a beginner to give it a go and to try it. And you can still see how effective it is. And if you do feel like being confident to stick them together, go right ahead. It's going to work perfectly. Please make sure that you share on our social media pages all of your makes with this. We'd love to see how it goes. Thank you for joining me. Go well. Bye-bye.